Please welcome to the stage Rob Nelson from Sia Partners.
Wow. Thank you for the warm reception. My name is Robert Nelson. I'm with Sia Partners. I'm really excited to show you an exposition today of what's possible through the metaverse. Within Sia Partners, I run our global XR services and Metaverse delivery studio. And we call that arm the Metaverse Guild. We're deeply nerdy at heart, so there might be some Dungeons and Dragons involved in that title. But no, we really love and are passionate about taking the technology of the metaverse out to financial services. And part of that mission for us is really understanding and helping our customers understand how do we frame the metaverse? What do we do in that space? How do we make it impactful? Why we think it's going to be the future that drives not just FS, but all industries, and really becomes a driving force for good. In the last discussion, there was a great conversation around the hybrid workforce and the hybrid work environment. And I think the metaverse is really going to empower workers across the globe to have a new type of work dynamic, thanks to some of the things that happened and some of the new norms we've established with COVID-19. We'll talk through some of the high-level use cases that we think are going to be really game-changing in that space. And then we'll have a panel that, after this conversation, will kind of bring us back down to reality and talk about the practical nature of utilizing this technology today and in the near future. So let's frame the metaverse. This is an arena. An arena is a great metaphor for what the metaverse is. So when I go to an arena and I'm at a sports event, I can be a spectator, I can be a vendor in the stadium, and I could be a player on the field. But in the metaverse, I can do all of those three things at one time, which is a very different type of mindset to bring to any sort of corporate function. So when we're talking about the metaverse, it's really a spectrum between the physical and the digital world. And we're all intimately familiar with the physical world. And thanks to COVID-19, we've become intimately familiar with the digital world as well. What the metaverse allows us to do is kind of blend those two paradigms into one. So we're talking about, the mobility revolution. We saw augmented reality come online. So you've had apps like Pokemon Go, for example, or even Google Maps, where I can see something that's physically real, like a satellite image, and then overlay data and information on top of that. On the other end of the spectrum, there's the VR world, right, where I can actually take a virtual experience and wrap myself in it. And it's highly immersive in that context. Now, when I switch between those two paradigms, if I'm going from what is an AR experience to a VR experience and back and forth, we call that mixed reality. The wrapper we put around that entire type of thinking is called extended reality, and it's a lot to take in, so I understand if it's a little bit complex at first. But I'm going to talk today a lot about XR, and when I'm saying XR, I'm talking about all of those experiences as a part of a spectrum. So what is a metaverse? So the first important thing to grasp about the metaverse is it does not yet exist. But really what it is a singular place where we can take blended physical and digital content, experience it, and have a co-presence within it. And it sustains itself even when we're not there. Even when we actually exit a metaverse experience, the impact we've made in the metaverse remains. The reason it's actually not real yet is because there is a multiverse of metaverses, which is super confusing. The multi-metaverse, or whatever we want to call it. But in that context, it's important to understand that those things are merging together. So we're seeing this already happening, connectors being built between different types of experiences, and people are being drawn into a more centralized type of experience. There used to be 50 to 100 platforms. Now we're winnowing down to maybe 25, 10, and we think in the future it might be just a few. But we're not there yet, but every year we're making more and more progress towards a unified type of experience like that. So in the context of XR, we got to think about the metaverse in the way those experiences actually drive the way that humans interact. So like I mentioned before, if we're talking about the spectrum of XR, from a VR standpoint, I'm going to take the human to the metaverse. I'm going to immerse them, and I'm going to give them an experience. And there's platforms today that drive that really well that are fairly inexpensive. I think today the Oculus Quest 2 is quite good. There's others in that space as well. But on the AR side, it's a little different, right? That's taking a piece of the metaverse and allowing a human to experience it in their physical reality. And there's great use cases for that as well. Products like Microsoft HoloLens, some yet-to-be-released products from Meta and Apple that we'll talk about in a minute. But all those things and all those capabilities are really what are allowing us to transform the world of work. Not only the way that we engage customers and drive a revenue engine, but also the way that we're actually able to drive efficiency internally. So I'm going to talk a lot today about those two different paradigms, both on the efficiency side and the way that we engage customers, and they're both very different, but also highly interesting, and I hope you guys agree. So we talked a little bit about the past, about Pokemon Go, Google Maps, what happens with immersive. We call them immersive 2D experiences when they're on your phone, and those are great, and those aren't going away. Those are still part of the metaverse. But what's interesting is we're seeing this shift now where VR and AR are becoming more mainstream. There's a lot of different products and platforms that exist in that space, but then there's a future segment that's coming. It's not here yet, it's coming. That's what we call BCI. So BCI is going to be a new way that we control the metaverse experience, and some companies are deciding to do that by embedding microchips in your brain, which is, to me, terrifying. Others are actually looking at sensors that sit on your forehead, and you can actually sort of use your brain waves, kind of like the Force in Star Wars. It's kind of out there. And they use that technology to actually allow you to control without using your hands. So it's almost like a sixth sense, if you will, to be able to control the metaverse. So the way that we manipulate and engage digital content is changing. That's the key takeaway from this. And as we're changing the way that we interact with that information, we're basically taking all of the data and the information and the learnings from all of human existence that lives on the internet, and we're able to bring it to bear on command, which is super powerful if we do it the right way. So I'm not the only one that is super passionate about the opportunity here. There's a whole slew of analysts that are forecasting the future of this experience, and it goes way beyond entertainment, right? That's just the tip of the iceberg. 8 trillion TAM for the metaverse, which is astounding to me, and most people think that's very low. It could be as high as 14. Already we've got 22 billion in metaverse content and solutions, as well as another 22 in crypto and NFT investment, and we're looking at 23 million new jobs generated in the metaverse over the next 10 years, which is fantastic. But I think that's extremely low and very conservative of a guess. But there's a tsunami coming. There's something that's really game-changing that's going to happen, and I think we all got to get ready for it. So up until now, we've been this explore and create sort of phase, where we're looking at this technology and kind of trying to figure out what is it going to do. Let's experiment, let's do some R&D, and try to understand concretely what are the ways that we can use it to propel our business. There's been some success, but I think for the most part, more failures. People trying to go after what they think are valuable use cases and deciding they don't work. That's okay, and that's actually a really important part of us getting to the true value of bringing this technology to bear. We call this the OM, or the keep calm and stay ready sort of phase, but we're moving on now into the market penetration phase, where we feel like the technology is getting more mature, the platforms are evolving and sort of consolidating in capability, and now we want to start thinking about delivering consistent content and consistent solutions to our customers and internally to our enterprise enablement sort of mission. As part of that, we're looking at how do we measure impact, right? So there's a ton of work going on with instrumentation, trying to make sure that we understand the ways at which the metaverse is driving impact. And there's a really key point here in terms of the ROI of the metaverse, which is time. All right? So as we're adopting this technology, what it enables us to do is save lots of time. Training is huge, and we'll go into some of these use cases, but we're able to train people about 4 times the rate that we are, 4 times as fast the rate as we would be with traditional training, whether it's training in person or even through like a Zoom meeting, and we can do it more cheaply, which I think is a big game changer. We'll go into a little bit more about how that works and how that works in FinServe, but I think that's the key across all use cases, and that's the main lever to wanting to enable this technology is to kind of take back that time and use it for something else more productive. What's coming next? Well, we want to exploit that, right? So we want to take what are the main drivers of the technology and marry those up to the lifeblood of our business. What are the things, what are the revenue drivers and the efficiency opportunities that we can use to harness the metaverse? And we're not quite there yet, and one of the critical reasons is size and scale, right? So the technology isn't quite small enough to be ubiquitous. Everyone has, well, not everyone, but 1 in 5 of you has tried the metaverse, and if you want to try it today, you can go to our Sia Partners booth in the back right corner here and get in the metaverse and give our virtual office a try. But if you have tried it, you'll know it's heavy, it's bulky. It's not something you want to keep on your face for, say, 8 hours of a workday. So things are going to change, and I think they're going to change remarkably in the next 18 months, we think. And part of what that means is that we have this inflection point that's coming. We call it the demand tsunami. And if history is a guide for us, I don't know how many of you have an iPhone in the audience, but I do remember when the iPhone first came out, and it was very different from any other type of phone that I'd ever used because it had so much capability. And it quickly kind of took over, and the smartphone revolution happened, and Apple ran away with it. Right? Now today there's like 2, 3 major phone brands, right? And I would expect we're going to see the same sort of experience or the same sort of scenario play out for experiences in the metaverse. Apple today is working on their M2 chip, and they just released the specs for their M1 Ultra chip. We know for a fact they're working on an AR/VR device that they want to deploy to consumers. Everyone is sort of shaking in their boots, trying to figure out when that's going to get deployed and how they're going to be able to utilize it in a way that's going to be productive for business. So I think if we start today thinking about how we can build metaverse solutions that enable our customers to do more, that enable ourselves to do more as businesses, we might make it in time for that tsunami. We might. But the development path on that journey is fairly long, especially if we're just starting in that R&D phase, in the exploration phase. So really, this is sort of the clarion call for us to say, okay, it's time to wake up and embrace this technology and do it in the right way. So I want to go a little bit deeper into some of the concepts that I was talking about earlier. We talked a little bit about training, but I think there's more there that's important to dig into. So one of the very first use cases for the metaverse was the ability to do remote collaboration, the ability to bring somebody in that's maybe a subject matter expert that knows a lot about a certain thing that I'm working on that I need help with, and can actually look over my shoulder or actually remote in through my headset and actually see what I'm working on. Maybe I'm interacting with a customer and I need some coaching. Maybe I'm working on a really challenging problem on a spreadsheet and I need someone to take a look at how I'm operating with my terminal. There's n number of use cases for that type of approach, but it's hugely valuable to be able to scale talent. And because our subject matter expertise within any enterprise organization is limited, it allows us to do that at scale across the globe, which is super impactful. When it comes to engaging with customers, I can do the same sort of thing, but I can turn it on its head a little bit. So I can take my sales team and put them together with some of my subject matter experts that are actually building solutions and maybe mock up a prototype. We're doing this today with some of our customers outside of this, right, when it comes to building like skyscrapers and things. Some of our customers in mechanical construction, they're putting together virtual mock-ups, right? Some of our customers in FinServe are looking at, could I build a virtual branch? Could you help me build something and design something before I actually build it and build something brick and mortar? And that's very cool, and it allows for a lot of really quick iteration and design thinking approaches to common waterfall approaches to building concrete physical objects. I talked about training a little bit. So the use case and the ROI for training is insane. So it's 4 times faster than normal training. And on top of that, if I'm using that approach, right, I've got a way better, it's almost 300% better learning retention rate. So I've got a captive audience when I put on my goggles. And I'm able to tell people, right, that they're actually experiencing something that's a facsimile of what they would really see in real life. So we're actually able to build assets that resemble their workspace. We can have AI-driven conversations with potential customers. We can have almost anything that you see in the physical world imported into a digital construct and have employees and train talent to be able to utilize them effectively. And vice versa, we can also bring customers or consumers into that experience and give us feedback on our process before we deploy it broadly at scale. So going a little bit deeper down that rabbit hole, we're talking when it comes to the actual simulating of real experiences, right? We know a lot of big banks are working on how to build the best soft skill customer relationship training there is. And we can actually do that in the context of the metaverse by leveraging the power of AI and using that to better prepare people for worst case scenarios and how to work through very challenging human types of problems. At the same time, we're able to help them solve business problems too using that technology. Just like I mentioned with the training where we're importing those digital assets, right? I can break those digital assets in the metaverse and ask people to try to put them back together, right? It doesn't matter if it's a process, if it's a piece of technology, right? Or even if it's a human relationship, right? All of those things I can simulate, I can break, and I can teach and communicate and empower customers to understand better through that medium. We talked a little bit about on the sales side, but I think designing and prototyping goes beyond just a physical construct, right? So I can design process, I can design culture, I can get people together and have deep discussions around what's important to them, and then actually build a process and a dynamic within my work environment that's going to be resonating for them and make them more productive. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because as people start to utilize this medium more and more for what's important to their work experience, they're starting to really realize the benefit and ideate. Really, their creative imagination starts to run wild, and then we get into this sort of cycle of development where employees across the business are able to give us their insights on what they think would be a better experience in the metaverse and in XR. The last thing I want to touch on here, which is super interesting here, is we call it contextual overlays or data overlays, but another way I like to think about it is like 3D analytics. So some of our customers in the banking and FinServ space really are now starting to gravitate towards 3D analytics, not because they can get better insights if they look at a graph in 3 dimensions in an XR context, but because they can get insights much more quickly. So I can take 3, 4, even 5 data sets and merge them all together in a 3D space and actually pivot them, right, and understand where trends exist much more quickly. And that's very powerful, especially for customers. If customers want to see portfolio performance, if customers want to understand more about how their money is working for them, we can make that a very enticing sort of experience because we'll have the capability to build out something that's customized for what they want to see, but at the same time gives them sort of a new capability and offers a competitive advantage. So thinking about the consumer engagement side, there's a lot of stuff happening on the consumer side, and in fact, I think that's where most of the work has been done so far. Less on the productivity and employee enablement side, more on just getting customers engaged and trying to generate revenue, which I think is interesting. Certainly, product placement has been very important in the past, so companies are looking at, how do I deliver my branded sneaker or my branded clothing item into the metaverse, right? Luxury brands are doing very well in the metaverse because they have such great recognition. I think this is a picture of Louis Vuitton, the game, which I think is fascinating that someone decided to build a metaverse experience based on that luxury brand. But as I'm in a brick and mortar setting, I can actually take a data overlay. We talked about augmented reality. I can take a data overlay, use your personal information about what your preferences are, and actually guide you to places throughout the store where I think you're going to want to shop, which I think is super helpful. And as you're shopping for stuff in the physical world, I can do the same thing in the metaverse. So I can take the desire you have for that specific brand and then sell you the same brand of clothing for your avatar, which your virtual self can wear around in a metaverse scenario. So we got this whole wave of virtual fashion that's happening right now. It's highly speculative. A lot of it's tied to NFTs, non-fungible tokens. Another highly speculative type of investment. And this is a Coke machine right here. It's sold for $1.1 million. It doesn't actually give you anything you can drink. It just lives in the metaverse. This type of experience for consumers, I think, is sort of reaching the limit of what is probably healthy in terms of speculation and value, for that matter. I think we're seeing a little bit of the demand drop off, specifically for the non-fungible tokens and the direct-to-avatar clothing, although there's still a healthy market there. I think the industry itself is gravitating more towards the productivity and the consumer enablement side of things, trying to make people's lives better as opposed to sell them more things. So I want to talk a little bit about the demographics of the metaverse, because I think it's a really important thing for everyone to understand in this room. Many of you might not have used any sort of XR experience ever, and that's okay. I mentioned that 1 in 5 adults in America has used XR, and while that's true, a lot of that is skewed by demographics, all right? I think what's also really interesting to note is a lot of valuable companies and a lot of really smart people are already bringing the power of the metaverse to bear. But if you look at this graph here, you'll see that almost 2/3 of the people using XR today are between the ages of 16 and 34, right? So a third of those people have not even entered the workforce yet. But they want to have an experience, we think, that will drive the behavior that they have currently. And in a lot of ways, it makes sense as a lure to bring in top talent to leverage the metaverse to do that. In the same token, you've got folks, another third or so, that are maybe in the early stage of their career, or maybe early management, that have used this experience on a regular basis. So I think as time goes on, we're going to see more and more people comfortable in this technology. But like I mentioned before, there is a lot of work to do with regards to the way that we take this technology and spread it out to the masses. And that kind of leads into this point right here of, from a gender breakdown, if my clicker would work, there it is. Who's using the metaverse from a gender context? So it's still very heavily male-centric. And there's some important reasons to understand for why that is. The first is motion sickness. So what a lot of people don't know is that women experience motion sickness on average about 30% more than men do in an XR experience. All right? We understand that, and we've kind of counteracted ways, or we've built counteractive ways to circumvent that problem by making the technology more robust. It turns out that the shutter speed, the frame rate that's going on really affects the motion sickness people feel. I experienced extreme motion sickness when I started using XR about 10 years ago. I still get it sometimes. It's not great. But as we're getting to that next wave of technology, we're going to see that completely disappear. So if you think about the way that the technology lifecycle for the metaverse works, it's like a stair stepper, right? And the software that drives it is more of an asymptotal curve. So it's an exponential growth pattern. And where we are right now is we're at a place where on the software side, we've solved the majority of the problems that are necessary to be able to deploy the metaverse at scale, right? But there's bad experiences that are still happening. And a lot of the reason for that is because the hardware just hasn't caught up yet to where the software is, right? And beyond that, there's infrastructure behind the scenes. There's cloud infrastructure that's super critical to driving those experiences globally at scale. That's now catching up. So as all of those things catch up, we're in a much better place to understand how we can actually deploy this technology at scale and use it to our advantage. I think from my company's perspective, the Sia Partners' perspective, we're really, really heavily entrenched in making sure DEI is first and foremost on the front of the way that we develop these experiences. So you can think of the metaverse like the internet, right? So there's a backbone, there's an an underlying layer to it that we don't ever see, we don't ever experience, but it's important. And my company doesn't make the backbone, right? That's going to be your Microsofts, your Metas, your Apples, your Amazons. They're driving the cloud infrastructure that really powers the metaverse. But what I'm talking about is the front end, the web pages, the things that we all experience every day. We want to make sure that we have a very solid and diverse approach to how we build those experiences so that they work for everyone. Because like I noted with the motion sickness example earlier, the reason why we have a huge issue with that, and we've been plagued by that, is because these experiences were developed by men, first and foremost, and that's a huge problem. So I think, as we're starting to think about, do we develop these experiences for everyone? We need to think about the way that they're deployed thoughtfully so that people don't feel like they're left behind in that cycle. They feel like they're empowered with the solutions that we build, and they feel like at the end of the day, it's something they're comfortable using. I always tell myself, if I can't give it to my 90-year-old mother and hand it off to her, and she can't get in an experience and enjoy it, I haven't done it right. And we're still struggling with that challenge. It's still ongoing, but we will get there. I think this industry is very determined to get there in the space of not just financial services, but how we apply the technology broadly. I'm going to go forward just a little bit. So going into a little bit of what's important in financial services, we talked a little bit about the way that we can do data overlays, right? So here's an example of something our partners had put together not recently, a couple of years ago actually now, of a virtual office, right? A person can actually build themselves an office around them through this context. And what's happening in this slide, which I think is interesting, right, is this individual's actually just pulling up screens. It wasn't too long ago that everyone said, oh, I need to have 2 screens, or I need to have 3 screens to be able to do my work effectively. Now I have the capability of bringing in infinite screens to my workplace, which is really cool. So, and I can take that with me anywhere. I don't have to be in an office. I can be at a client site. I can be in my backyard. It doesn't really depend on locational context. It just depends on if I have a Wi-Fi signal. We talked a little bit about skills training. This is a farmer's example that was put together, I think last year, and a way for agents to actually go through a process of damage survey within a home here. That's just one small use case, just kind of scraping the surface of things that we can do with this technology and ways that we can use it to empower employees to do a better job. Like I mentioned before, people that go through this type of process feel far more confident than they would through even hands-on working in-person training, because they can actually go see a broken house. I mentioned before that you can import something into the metaverse and then break it, right? I can import a house and light it on fire, and then put out the fire, and then have an assessor go in and give me an assessment. Field engagement is another really cool capability that's coming online. I would love to see a show of hands. How many people here have an iPhone in their pocket? Awesome, me too. Okay. Did you know that in your phone you have a LiDAR 3D camera? It's literally like this space-age technology. This gentleman in the screen here, he's using his iPhone to build in real time a 3D model of that damaged minivan. So he's walking around that minivan and he's surveying damage. And now he has a model that he can bring back with him to the office, or he can put on a headset and go look at that and examine that anywhere he wants. So you all have that capability today, oddly enough, with your phone. And it's really interesting to see, as we're all carrying these phones around, mapping out the world around us. It's no wonder that Apple is likely going to be making a play soon for the metaverse, since we're all basically going to be building the 3D assets that they will likely be using in the future. So the other side of that coin, we talked about sort of the general, right? I'm going into the more industry-specific things. So the virtual branch, right? Here's an example of one that we had put together. And we do a lot of these, depending on needs, right? There's certainly an appetite for a meeting space where people can have a conversation, where they can meet up and maybe review documentation or get some sort of advisory services. It can go much deeper than that. And I think that what's critical is it's only limited by two things. One is your imagination, and two is compliance issues, which we can get into later. But I think certainly because this is a new burgeoning technology, and thanks, I think, in part to the COVID-19 pandemic that we all experienced, a lot of those compliance issues have been fast-tracked, and I think we're beyond that point where those things have become really blockers to establishing business in the metaverse. And I think this is a great solution for, again, that hybrid context of a work environment where I don't necessarily feel the need, or I don't feel like I'm available to come into the office all the time, but I still want to have something that approximates a real-life experience. Now, one thing, if you have used the metaverse, that you might realize is that there's no actual physical people there. It's all these cartoony-looking avatars, right? So it's an approximation of you, and that's not a replacement, in my humble opinion, for face-to-face human contact. I don't know that it ever will be in my lifetime, but we are very close to getting something that approaches like 80% of that. So, like I mentioned before, there's the asymptotal curve of the way that the software is orchestrated, and then there's the technology component that's more of a stair-stepper. As the technology has progressed and the software issues have been solved, we've gotten to a point where we think that we can reliably deliver something that approaches a photorealistic avatar where you have eyes moving and mouth moving in real time mapped to your own face. And what's cool about that is 90% of our communication is nonverbal. I might have that wrong. It might be between 70 and 90. I can't remember exactly what it is. It's a lot. That's the most important thing. It's a lot of communication happening without talking. And if we can convey that through this medium, then we have a very robust platform for bringing large groups together across the globe in real time at scale. And that's a capability that we're just scratching the surface on, because we've just never been able to do that before, outside of maybe a Teams call, which is a very different experience. In an office setting like this, I can bring 50 people together in one place. I can talk to them, and addressing you all as a crowd. In fact, we could have done this entire thing in this office right now, based on how many people I'm seeing in the audience. We could have done this all there. And the cool thing about it is that after the conversation concludes, people can naturally gravitate, as they would in a normal sort of setting like this, towards these siloed conversations and have these breakouts naturally. And we have to do that today in platforms like Teams and in Zoom by doing these breakout rooms. I don't think they ever work. It's very convoluted. This gives us that opportunity to have more natural, free-flowing conversations like we would in the office, but without being in the office. So another interesting piece here is we were talking about education earlier. We're talking about educating employees and how they can better learn from a virtual training. I can also educate customers, right? So I can talk about awareness. I can actually, we talked about destroying property in the metaverse, which is not a crime yet. I can import your property into the metaverse, and then I can blow it up, and I can show you why you might want to buy that insurance plan. Here's what a Category 4 storm is going to do to your business. Maybe it's worth it, right? It's a little bit of boo to buy, right? It's a little bit of scaring them straight into a plan. But I think it's also important to note that seeing is believing, and if I can actually show you what that looks like, and so you physically understand what the risk is, I think I have a much better chance of partnering with a customer and selling them my services. I mentioned it a little bit before. This is actually a representation of what that would look like if I'm actually using the metaverse to visualize data. So we talked about 3D data and analytics and how that would come about. I can do that for customers. I can show them their portfolio and how they can interact with it and pivot data in real time to get those insights faster. And it's a competitive advantage, right? So if I'm providing that to my consumer, then they definitely have a leg up in terms of what they can see versus what someone else in a company that's not offering that type of solution can. All right. So I'm going to back up because I went way too far, but those are really fun. So after this one, we're going to do a panel where we're going to dissect some of those scenarios and kind of bring them down to reality. I think we're in the last 10 minutes. What I would love to do really quick is just open it up for some quick Q&A. So if anyone has some questions for me. Oh, we got one. That was quick.
Thank you. I actually have like a million questions, so I'll just keep it down.
Oh, go for it. No, that's
one
fine.
or two. But right away, and you touched on these a little bit, 3 areas came to mind. One is kind of a positive result that it could be, although it's probably 2 years too late. And it refers to the earlier discussion, which is how do you do the remote or hybrid and keep that relationship of kind of in person. And I guess I can already see when you're saying remote offices and remote conferences. But you were saying the technology's behind, but I imagine that the buildings are also behind. Like, to do it right, you probably have to build some of this tech into the new offices. Are you finding that some of the companies are starting to think of that?
Yes. And so it's a great point. You're not a plant, I swear.
I'm not.
No, that's a great point. If you go back to the slide I mentioned where we had the tsunami, right? We're talking about that demand tsunami we think is coming, right? Yeah. There are components of those things that we want to go do, right? If it's in a virtual office or a virtual branch, there's things that haven't been done yet, right? And we have to develop those. We have to experiment and figure out what's the best way to do that. And that cycle can take between 18 months to 36 months, frankly. And that's a very fast cycle. So there's development time to work out those kinks, especially if you're going for some of the more detailed use cases. Collaboration's actually pretty easy. Like that one's out of the box, basically. Not a problem. But if I'm talking about payments, if I'm talking about paperwork, right, if I have compliance issues, right, if I'm talking about how do I do a lot of really rich customer enablement, any scenario where I'm a person that needs to go to a branch, and I don't want to go to a branch if I can help it, but I just can't help it a lot of times, right? If I have to go sign a mortgage, then I have to go to a branch, and someone has to talk me through a contract. That's fine. But the ability to do that in the metaverse is something that we still need to build the connectors for. We still need to flesh out those use cases with the software solutions. The good part is, though, that those between the 2D world, where we already do that, right, and the 3D world, it's not a huge leap. So it's not dramatic. The things that are really hard, though, are the things I was talking about with eye tracking and making sure that it feels like a real conversation. And luckily, those ones are being solved, too. I don't think individual businesses adopting this type of solution really have to worry about those as much because the major players that are building the platforms that these live on are solving those big, heady problems. But when it comes to these industry-specific types of use cases, absolutely. And it's going to take some time. And like I mentioned before, if we don't start very soon, we miss the boat.
Right. Okay.
And if you remember when Apple released the iPhone, right? Everybody wanted to hire Object-C developers yesterday. It was a really big deal. If I don't have an app on the Apple Store tomorrow, I'm not a real company, right? Just like 10 years before that, if I didn't have a website, I wasn't a real company. Now we're at the precipice of if I don't have a metaverse experience, I might not be a real company, and that's kind of scary. The problem is we don't exactly know when that's going to happen. The metaverse and XR in itself has been a very slow burn over time. And so we're very closely approaching that point, but I think we still have a little bit of wiggle room. So that's my encouragement is if you do have something that you think is going to be impactful, it's a great time to get started. Any other questions? Yeah.
So as we're coming out of the pandemic, we're starting to see companies pull their employees back into the office and rebel a little bit against the hybrid model. Taking this to that next step, how much of the adoption of this is going to be, kind of restrained by, enabling offices versus how much of this is cultural and really trying to get offices and companies and everybody to exist in a virtual world and want to do business in a virtual world?
That's just a really good question. Very deep. I love it. I think it's both. I think you can't go and build a profound experience without bringing culture along. I'm very much a believer in people-centric design, and one company's culture is going to dictate a very different metaverse experience than another's, right? And that's, I think, what's important about the way that these are built is it doesn't have to be a one-size-fits-all type of solution, right? It needs to work for the people that are engaged in it. And so there's a lot of great opportunity for customization in this space because it is like we're building the internet again. Just think about what that journey was like, right? It was really revolutionary when I could order a pizza online. Like, that was a big deal, right? We're way beyond that. But we're back to that sort of like greenfield level of development where we can start over. There was a lot of mistakes when people started building the web. What was it, 20, 30 years ago now? We can learn from those lessons and really build solutions that are going to accelerate, both the function, but the culture and the people engagement at the same time. I hope that answers your question. Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Thanks. You mentioned we're on the precipice there of kind of XR, everything kind of growing in the metaverse. We're also on the precipice of the new ESG rules and all that kind of stuff, and the power that this stuff's going to take, and the infrastructure, the networking, everything from that perspective. What are we thinking about the impact there?
What are we thinking about?
What's it going to take to support this? What's the ultimate downstream? What's your environmental impact, right, of having to boost the infrastructure to support a metaverse, right, a full-scale metaverse that you're thinking that we're on a tidal wave for?
I have to unpack a little bit because there's some conflation, I think, in your statement. So when you're talking about the environmental impact of the metaverse, people immediately go to crypto, which has a massive environmental impact. The metaverse does not have to be crypto-enabled. That is an option, right? So you got to think about the metaverse as being the concept of basically wrapping yourself in the internet and everything that has to offer. There are some elements of that will not be environmentally friendly, right? At the same token, there will be some opportunities to make things more environmentally friendly. If I need less office space because I've got virtual branches, I've got virtual offices, then that's a massive reduction in my company's carbon footprint. But at the same token, right, I might be offsetting with if I'm bringing in a crypto investment, and those aren't, as a reformed crypto miner myself, I certainly empathize with that industry, but there is now changes being made on that side to make that even more green, right? So you've got what's happening with Ethereum 2.0, the whole proof of stake type of concept that's being enacted. I think we're seeing that sort of responsibility taking shape in the crypto space. And there's going to be a talk later, which I'm super excited for, on Web3. I hope you bring that question to those guys as well, or if you're part of it. I don't know if you are. But in the Web3 side of things, which incidentally is very similar to what we call the metaverse, right? Those are some of the individual component pieces that we want to try to weave through the metaverse. Like, all of those are super important, but we have to be careful about what we pick and choose. And I think ultimately it just needs to add value to the user at the end of the day. And if it's doing that, then I think that's a great starting place. And certainly there's the carbon footprint component that needs to be taken into account, or the environmental impact component, right? Because it's not just carbon, right? It's batteries, right? It's toxic materials, all that stuff. Taken in holistically, that also has an impact on the consumer as well. And I think, from our context, we want to make people aware if that's the case. Certainly, but it was a good one. Yeah, one more.
Hi, thank you for your talk. I'm Jessica Dunn. I am actually shocked to hear you say 1 in 5 people have experienced the metaverse.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I've talked to about this for a couple months, and not one person I've talked to has actually been in the metaverse.
I thought I was going to hear that. I thought I was going to hear this question, by the way.
And I also teach a Girls Who Code class, and not one of them has been in the metaverse either. But everybody can tell me about NFTs and cryptocurrency. And also the other thing I hear all the time is the metaverse is meta.
The metaverse is meta.
It's meta.
The company, or is just a meta concept?
It's the company.
Okay.
Like they think that the company is also the metaverse. And so are you hearing the same thing? And when you say the data is really skewed, that those people that are experiencing the metaverse, I tend to think that's even more than what you displayed.
I think you're actually right. I think it is super skewed, and I don't trust the male to female numbers on that. That's the data that's taken to date. I think it's really important that we're constantly capturing that as best we can. We don't have the data right now to tell you what it is at this exact moment, but anecdotally from people we've talked to, I think it's more 60-30 male-female split favoring male utilization, and that's a problem for the way that we're developing these solutions because they're not working for everybody. And I think looking at the demographics, right, it's a very young type of consumer that's utilizing that solution today. And so I think that's why in the workplace, I'm talking to my peers, they're like, I've never used the metaverse. I don't know what a metaverse is. But also that the concept itself is nebulous because it's a thing that doesn't exist yet. It's a concept that could exist. That's something that we would like to exist. So I think the better way to frame it is, have you used an AR, VR experience? I don't know if you're actually asking that question because we conflate those things very regularly. Even myself, I'm totally guilty of that. But it's definitely something that I'm really concerned about, that we make the experience work for everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think we're at time, so I'm going to give it to...
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. I'll be back.